Yeah, it was a beautiful wedding, and as a mother, to see my son so happy means so much. What more can you ask for?
And the whole situation was really awkward for everyone in the room.
David and Victoria, two of the most famous people in the world, with a runaway son in the United States, waging war on his parents. He effectively reached out to his mother and father saying, please don't speak to me ever again. I do not wish to reconcile. Only talk to me through lawyers. And he effectively characterised his parents as having ruined his life.
They've lost the game here. They really can't control their son anymore.
What the public saw was a polished, high-gloss fairy tale. A global sports icon's family, a fashion empire, a billionaire heiress, and a wedding designed to look like the cleanest, most untouchable kind of celebrity unity. But stories like that only stay perfect when everyone agrees to play their role. And for years, it's been rumored that something inside this family wasn't simply tense, it was quietly separated. Now the distance isn't subtle anymore. Brooklyn Beckham has stopped moving like a son trying to keep the peace and started moving like a man drawing a line. The shift is what's turning this from tabloid chatter into a real rupture. Because when the oldest child steps away publicly, it changes the family's center of gravity.
I mean, it's such a truth bomb that he dropped on Monday night. 6 pages of bombshell after bombshell. And yeah, he really has started a nuclear war, as in showbiz terms.
It forces everyone to pick a narrative, even if they never wanted one. Brooklyn Beckham grew up inside a brand as much as a household. When your last name is built into headlines, appearances become obligations and silence becomes strategy. For a long time, any reports of strain between Brooklyn Beckham, Nicola Peltz, and the Beckham family were framed as normal adjustment. New marriage, big personalities, two powerful families learning how to share space. The kind of tension people assume will cool off once the cameras move on. But what's been circulating behind the scenes suggests the opposite, that the cameras were part of the pressure, that the expectations were not just emotional but structural. Who shows up, who stands where, what gets posted, what gets denied, and what gets smoothed over before it becomes a story.
Even the Beckhams try to control what their children say.
Then came the moment that made it harder to dismiss. Brooklyn's public tone shifted into something sharper and more final, signaling that this wasn't a misunderstanding that could be repaired with a group photo. It read like a decision, not a reaction, like someone who believes the problem isn't one argument, but a pattern. And if you want to understand why it escalated to this point, you have to rewind to April 2022 in Palm Beach, Florida. The wedding looked like a spectacle of unity, but the rumors that followed it have never fully gone away. And the longer they lingered, the more they started to sound like the opening chapter instead of the aftermath. The early warning signs didn't come from some dramatic tabloid leak. They came from small decisions that in a high-profile family can feel like messages. One of the most repeated flashpoints in the story is the wedding dress situation.
Victoria was meant to be designing Nicola Peltz's dress, and Brooklyn claimed that Victoria withdrew that offer weeks before the wedding, meaning that she had to scramble for another dress.
In accounts that have circulated around the couple, Brooklyn Beckham has suggested the first real rupture happened when Victoria Beckham was initially linked to the idea of designing Nicola Peltz's gown, then stepped away close to the finish line. Nicola ultimately wore Valentino, and what might have been a normal change in any other wedding allegedly landed like an emotional gut punch here, because it wasn't just about fabric. It was about symbolism, visibility, and who gets to set the tone of a major life moment. Neither side has ever offered a single definitive public explanation that shuts the rumor down. Instead, the silence left room for competing versions to breathe, which only intensified the perception that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a control issue, dressed up as wedding logistics. Then comes the reception moment that people still point to as the scene where the tension stopped being private. The story goes that Mark Anthony performed during the celebration, and what was expected to be the couple's key dance got redirected in a way that stunned the room. In the version Brooklyn has been associated with, Nicola was not the one brought forward. Instead, the attention swung toward Victoria.
Victoria was placed in a difficult position by the singer Mark Anthony at the wedding because he's on stage and he says, please, would the most beautiful woman at this wedding please step on stage.
With a compliment that effectively positioned her as the focal point. The fallout, as it's been described, was immediate. Nicola allegedly left the space in tears, guests reportedly froze, and the energy in the room shifted from celebration to confusion. Brooklyn's framing of it is that the moment felt humiliating, not because of a dance in isolation, but because of what it represented on the biggest night of their lives.
He called Brooklyn onto stage. Everyone's expecting it to be Nicola to go up and do the first dance. And then Mark Anthony asks the most beautifulest woman in the room to come to the stage. And then he says, Victoria, come to the stage. And Mark Anthony's like, go, put your hands on your mother's hips. And it was a Latin, it's a Latin thing. And Nicola leaves the room crying her eyes out.
From there, the story turns darker, with claims that the memory of the wedding became so complicated that the couple later chose to reaffirm their commitment in private, away from the family gravity and the public gaze. For Brooklyn Beckham, the reception incident wasn't just an awkward moment that people would laugh about later. In the version of events he's aligned himself with, it represented something bigger, a pattern, a boundary issue, a signal that even on the night meant to mark his own beginning, the center of gravity could still get pulled back toward the family orbit, not because anyone needed to win a dance, but because the message felt familiar.
The eldest son saying that his parents care more about their brand than they do about love and their family and their own kids.
Your milestones are still ours to manage. And that's why the wedding drama, at least in Brooklyn's framing, didn't stay confined to one night. He implied the real conflict was already in motion long before Palm Beach, tied to control, identity, and the mechanics of the Beckham brand. One of the most serious claims associated with his statement is that he felt pressured to sign agreements involving the use of his name, something he believed could shape future business decisions, his marriage, and even how his future family would be positioned.
The Beckhams, cynical showbiz megalomaniacs or heartbroken parents, which is it?
I'd say the former.
Wow!
Not long after, he began presenting himself publicly as Brooklyn Peltz Beckham, a move that reads differently when placed next to those allegations. In a vacuum, it's easy to interpret as style. In context, it can look like a protective wall, a way of asserting that his identity isn't just an extension of someone else's legacy, but something he and Nicola Peltz control together. He also suggested that affection inside the household became conditional, not on private respect, but on public compliance. Show up, post the right thing, keep the image clean, and you're embraced. Miss a moment, skip a high-profile appearance, decline to perform the happy family version on command, and the warmth turns into distance. In that telling, love isn't only felt, it's scheduled. Since the statement, the couple's posture has reportedly been calm and unified. They've been seen together in Malibu looking relaxed, close, and unbothered by the noise. People close to them have described it as relief more than rebellion, like finally saying the quiet part out loud lifted a weight they'd been carrying for a long time. At 26, Brooklyn Beckham seems to be steering his life towards something smaller, quieter, and more controllable. Less red carpet, more routine, more craft than spectacle. He's poured energy into food content, built out his Cooking with Brooklyn identity, pushed his Cloud 23 hot sauce, and dipped into lifestyle moves that can stand on their own instead of leaning on the family machine. In that light, the shift doesn't read like a tantrum, it reads like self-preservation, like someone choosing oxygen over optics. On the other side, the response has been almost entirely absent. David Beckham and Victoria Beckham have not met the claims head-on in public. No point-by-point rebuttal, no interview, no carefully staged moment meant to reset the narrative. People around the family have floated the idea that they're hurt, even blindsided, but staying silent because any direct reaction could turn a rupture into a full-scale war. But restraint doesn't stop consequences. Reports around the situation describe a wall going up fast, social media distance, communication tightened, and a preference for messages to be handled through representatives rather than emotional back and forth. The younger siblings, at least publicly, appear to be walking a careful line, saying nothing while every small online move gets dissected like a clue. And that's where this stops being a family disagreement and starts threatening the infrastructure. For decades, the Beckham image hasn't just been fame, it's been unity as a brand promise. When that unity cracks in public, it's not only personal pain on display, it's a legacy story shifting in real time with business, identity, and control all tangled together. Because when Brooklyn Beckham aimed his criticism at Brand Beckham, he wasn't just describing hurt feelings. He was taking a swing at the operating system of a celebrity dynasty that's been built, protected, and refined for decades. The Beckham reputation has never been only about fame. It's been about structure, the sense that everything is deliberate, every public moment aligned, every family appearance reinforcing the same message: unity, discipline, and control. That's why his words landed like a rupture instead of a disagreement. A family argument is messy but contained. A brand argument suggests strategy, image management, and power. And in the version Brooklyn has presented, the pressure wasn't occasional. It was constant, starting early, shaping how he saw himself. Not as a person who could make mistakes, but as a symbol whose missteps would become headlines. He's described living with that kind of awareness like an anxiety loop where every choice feels like it belongs to an audience. And if you view his path through that lens, the zigzag makes more sense. Modeling, photography, short-lived creative ventures, public experimentation that never had room to be private.
Dance is a very small part of the bigger problem.
The outside world framed it as entitlement and stamped him with the Nepo baby label, a term he's acknowledged as a shadow that follows him. But from his perspective, the sting wasn't just criticism. It was the feeling of being denied a normal learning curve, where you can fail quietly, recalibrate, and try again without millions of strangers narrating it for you. That context becomes crucial when Nicola Peltz enters the story. In Brooklyn's framing, she didn't just become his partner, she became an alternative reality. Not because she isn't wealthy or connected, but because her identity wasn't forged inside the Beckham ecosystem. The contrast, as is often described, is that Nicola's world is built less on performance and more on boundaries. Less on image-first unity and more on private loyalty, emotional closeness, and independence. And once that contrast exists, it doesn't stay theoretical. It forces a choice. Keep orbiting the family brand, or build a smaller life where the relationship is the center, not the branding. Brooklyn's recent posture suggests he believes he has already made that choice. Brooklyn has framed his relationship with Nicola Peltz as more than romance. In his telling, it introduced him to a different blueprint for family, one where support is expressed privately, boundaries are respected, and love isn't measured by how well you perform in public. And once you've seen that kind of stability up close, he suggests it becomes hard to tolerate a life where connection feels transactional. What made his statement feel especially raw is that he didn't only point to headline-friendly flashpoints like weddings and image control. He included smaller, more human details, the kind that people argue about because they hit a nerve. One of those stories involved animals during the Los Angeles wildfire chaos, when families, shelters, and volunteers were scrambling. In Brooklyn's version, Nicola tried to reach out for help finding placement for displaced pets and didn't get the support she expected. Whether that account leaves out context, timing, or complications is something outsiders can't know. But emotionally, you can see why it mattered to him. It wasn't about status. It was about compassion in a moment where compassion should be automatic. That's why this feud has split people so sharply. It's not a clean story with an obvious villain. It's two narratives colliding. On one side, a son insisting he's been pressured, managed, and dismissed for years, finally choosing honesty over harmony. On the other, a family with a long public record of opportunity, investment, and visible support now being accused of prioritizing the machine over the person. Online, the reaction has turned into camps. Some read his words as overdue, painful truth, others see ingratitude and impulsiveness. And in the middle are the details, emotional, unverifiable, and powerful enough to keep the argument burning. Some people are firmly on the Beckham side for one simple reason. They believe certain accusations should never be aired in public, even if the relationship is broken behind closed doors. In that view, there's a difference between setting boundaries and detonating the family's reputation in front of millions, and they argue Brooklyn crossed that line. And that's where Nicola Peltz becomes the lightning rod. Critics frame her as the catalyst, the outsider who pulled him away, because it's easier to blame a spouse than to accept that a grown son may have chosen distance on his own. Supporters push back hard, saying she's being treated like a convenient villain simply because she represents a new center of loyalty, and new loyalties always make old systems feel threatened. Brooklyn's own position, as he's presented it, is that this isn't manipulation, it's relief. He's tried to make it clear that he isn't being controlled, and that the decision to step back from his parents was the first time he felt calm instead of compressed. That distinction is important to him, because the isolated husband storyline removes his agency and turns the conflict into a simple morality play. The timing is what makes it harder to dismiss as a quick outburst.
Why I'm here is to talk about the word inappropriate. There was no slut dropping, there was no black cat PVC cat suits, there was no Spice Girl action. It was the timing.
Brooklyn Beckham waited a long time before going public in any direct way, which suggests this wasn't impulsive. In his framing, he swallowed discomfort for years, tried to keep the peace, and only spoke when he felt the public narrative had started moving without his consent. Once he believed the story was being shaped around him anyway, he treated silence like surrender. That's why his wording landed with such finality. He didn't describe a cooling off period. He described a door being closed on purpose. For any parent, famous or not, that kind of statement is chilling because it implies intention, not emotion. From David Beckham, what's been heard publicly has been indirect and restrained, leaning on the idea that children need room to grow, make mistakes, and learn in their own time. It reads as careful, almost protective, and it also leaves a vacuum. And in celebrity feuds, vacuums don't stay empty for long. Restraint can read two ways at once. To some, the careful, measured tone from David Beckham looks like wisdom, the kind of response that refuses to turn a family fracture into a public brawl. To others, that same calmness feels distant, like the emotional temperature has been turned down when the moment calls for warmth. That split in perception is part of what keeps this story burning, because silence doesn't land as neutral when people are already choosing sides. Victoria Beckham has remained publicly quiet, and the lack of a direct response has been interpreted in competing ways. Some see strategy, others see heartbreak, the kind that doesn't translate into statements or carefully placed quotes. The most painful speculation swirling around her is not about the wedding or the headlines, but about the future. If distance holds, it raises questions about what role, if any, she would have in the next generation of the family. For a parent, that possibility can cut deeper than any public accusation. Where does it go from here? No one can predict it with certainty. Some crisis observers argue that time is the only tool that consistently works, that public feuds often cool once the spotlight shifts and the emotional charge fades. Others say the opposite, that once claims are placed on the record in front of millions, the relationship changes shape forever. Because even if people reconcile privately, the public version of the rupture doesn't disappear. For now, Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz appear to be choosing distance over performance, fewer appearances, tighter boundaries, more control of their own story. And the rest of the family appears to be choosing quiet, possibly hoping restraint carries more weight than rebuttal. Either way, when a dynasty built on togetherness fractures in public, the fallout tends to linger because the image never returns to untouched. And this is where the story stops being gossip and starts feeling like a cautionary tale, because people keep trying to reduce it to one moment, one dance, one dress, one awkward scene that spiraled out of control. But that's not what breaks families. Families break when the same boundary gets crossed so many times that eventually someone stops asking for change and starts building distance instead.
The oldest Beckham son telling his 16.5 million followers, "I've never felt more uncomfortable or humiliated in my entire life." An ET source adds, Brooklyn never wanted to do a mother-son dance in the first place.
That's what makes this feel so final. Not the headlines, but the language of permanence. The idea that reconciliation isn't just difficult, it might not even be the goal anymore. And if that's true, then the real fallout isn't what the public thinks it knows. It's everything that happens off camera. Holidays that don't get shared, milestones that don't get celebrated together, future children growing up with gaps in their family story they didn't create. Meanwhile, the world keeps watching like it's a series, waiting for the next episode to drop, waiting for someone to blink first. But this isn't scripted. There's no clean reset. Once private pain becomes public history, the damage doesn't vanish. When the trending page moves on, it just becomes part of the record. A story people will bring up forever, even if the people living it try to move forward. And that's the quiet heartbreak under all of this. A family that once sold unity as identity is now learning what it costs when unity becomes a performance instead of a feeling. Because the moment the perfect image cracks, everyone sees what was always underneath: love, control, loyalty, resentment, and the brutal truth that even the most famous last name in the room can't protect you from the most ordinary kind of pain. If you made it this far, drop your take in the comments. Do you think this ends with time healing everything, or has the line already been crossed for good? And if you want more deep dives like this, celebrity power plays, loyalty wars, and the stories that nobody wants said out loud, tap in with BarzBuzz and stay locked for the next breakdown. If this saga had you shook, wait till you see what's next. You already know what it is. BarzBuzz got the real, raw, and unfiltered breakdowns. So don't forget to like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with someone who needs to catch up.